I still remember the exact moment my mother-in-law dropped a stack of dirty plates in front of me and said, "You missed a spot last night." Not asked, said, like I worked for her, like I always had. My husband didn't even look up from his phone. He just kept scrolling like this was normal, like I was invisible. For 3 years, I lived in that house, waking up early to cook breakfast for people who never once said thank you, cleaning rooms I wasn't even allowed to relax in, and smiling through insults disguised as jokes. They told me I was lucky to be part of their family, that I should earn my place. And I believed them, for a while. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that everything they had, the roof over their heads, the walls they mocked me inside, wasn't actually theirs anymore. And the day they found out, that's the day everything flipped. My name is Emily, I'm 27, and if you saw me back then, you'd probably think I was just another quiet wife trying to keep her marriage together. That's exactly what I let everyone believe. I married into what looked like a close, well-respected family. Nice house, family dinners every Sunday, the kind of life that feels secure from the outside. But the truth? That house wasn't a home. It was a place where respect had to be earned through obedience, and love came with conditions I could never seem to meet. My husband, Daniel, used to be different when we were dating. He listened, he cared, he made me feel seen. But the moment we moved into his parents' house, temporarily, everything changed. Suddenly, his mother's opinions mattered more than our marriage, and his silence became louder than any words he could have said. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that things would get better once we moved out, but we never moved out. And slowly, without even realizing it, I stopped being his partner and became their responsibility. What they didn't realize was I had already started making my own plans, and I was done asking for permission. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about being slowly disrespected. You don't notice the moment it crosses the line because the line keeps moving. At first, it was small things. My mother-in-law, Carol, would correct how I cooked, standing right behind me in the kitchen like I was being tested. "That's not how Daniel likes his eggs," she'd say, taking the pan from my hand without asking. Or she'd rewash dishes I had already cleaned, making sure I saw her do it. Every little action carried the same message. You're not good enough. And Daniel? He'd just laugh it off. "That's just how she is," he'd say, like that made it okay, like I was the one overreacting. Then it got worse. Family dinners became a weekly performance where I was always the punchline. Carol would bring up things like how I didn't grow up the way they did, or how I didn't understand real family values. His father, Mark, would sit there nodding, occasionally throwing in a comment about how women these days don't know how to take care of a home. And every time, I'd look at Daniel, silently begging him to say something, anything. But he never did. He'd just avoid eye contact, take another bite of food, and let it happen. I started doing more around the house, thinking maybe if I proved myself, things would change. I woke up earlier than everyone else to make breakfast, packed Daniel's lunch, cleaned every room from top to bottom. I even started doing their laundry, his parents', not just ours, just to keep the peace. And for a while, it seemed like it was working. The comments didn't stop, but they softened. At least, that's what I told myself. But the truth showed itself one night when Carol invited guests over without telling me. I came home from running errands to find a full dinner party already in progress. She looked at me, smiled in front of her friends, and said, "Oh, good, you're back. The kitchen's a mess. Can you take care of it?" Like I was hired help, like I didn't live there. Her friends barely acknowledged me as I walked past them, their eyes scanning me like they were trying to figure out my role in the house. I wanted to say something, to stand up for myself, but I didn't. I just nodded and went straight to the kitchen. That night, I stood there scrubbing dishes while I could hear them laughing in the other room. Every now and then, my name would come up, followed by a chuckle. I didn't need to hear the words to know what they were saying. And when Daniel finally came into the kitchen, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe he'll finally see what's happening. But all he said was, "Can you hurry up? Mom's asking for dessert." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, permanently. Because for the first time, I stopped asking myself how to fix things, and I started asking a different question, one that would change everything. What if I didn't belong here at all? That question stayed with me long after that night. What if I didn't belong here at all? At first, it felt scary to even think about it, like I was admitting failure. But the more I sat with it, the more it started to feel freeing. Because if I didn't belong there, then maybe I didn't have to keep trying so hard to earn a place that was never really mine. I stopped going out of my way to please them. Not in an obvious way, I wasn't trying to start a war, but I pulled back. I stopped waking up early to cook breakfast for everyone. I stopped doing Carol's laundry. I stopped asking Daniel what his parents wanted before making decisions. And almost immediately, the tension in the house changed. It wasn't subtle. Carol noticed first. "You've been a little distant lately," she said one morning, her tone sweet but her eyes sharp. I just smiled and said I'd been tired. She didn't believe me, I could tell, but she let it go. For a day. Then came the comments. "Must be nice to relax while the rest of us keep this house running," she said loudly one afternoon while I was sitting on the couch answering emails. Mark started making passive-aggressive remarks about people who forget their responsibilities. And Daniel? He finally had something to say, but not what I expected. "Can you just help out a little more?" he asked me that night, his voice low like he didn't want his parents to hear. "It's causing tension." I remember looking at him, really looking at him, and realizing something I had been avoiding for a long time. He didn't see a problem. Not with them. Only with me. That's when I stopped feeling guilty. Around the same time, something else was happening, something they knew nothing about. A few months earlier, before things had gotten this bad, I had reconnected with an old mentor of mine, Mr. Hargrove. He had helped me get my first job out of college, and when I told him I was thinking about getting back into real estate investment, he didn't hesitate. He offered to guide me, quietly, on the side. It started small, learning, researching, understanding the market again, but then an opportunity came up. The house we were living in. I didn't even realize it at first. It was listed under a holding company that had recently run into financial trouble. Payments had been missed, the property was at risk of being taken over by creditors. When I dug deeper, my heart started racing. Daniel's parents had been hiding it. Bad investments, poor decisions, and now they were on the verge of losing everything. But instead of telling anyone, instead of adjusting their lifestyle, they kept pretending everything was fine, while treating me like I was beneath them. I remember sitting there, staring at the documents, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. Mr. Hargrove laid it out for me clearly. If you move quickly, you can acquire the property through the holding company before it goes public. No one has to know, at least not right away. And for a moment, I hesitated, because this wasn't just any investment. It was their home, my home, the place where I had been made to feel small every single day. But then I thought about the kitchen, the dinners, the silence from the one person who was supposed to stand beside me. And just like that, my hesitation disappeared. I didn't say a word to anyone, not to Daniel, not to his parents. I just signed the papers. Signing those papers didn't feel dramatic in the moment. There was no music playing, no sudden rush of victory, just a quiet, steady sense that something had finally shifted in my favor. The process moved faster than I expected. Within weeks, everything was finalized. Legally, completely, undeniably, the house was mine. Not Daniel's, not his parents'. Mine. And the strangest part? Nothing changed on the surface. I still lived there. Carol still made her little comments. Mark still acted like he owned every inch of the place. And Daniel still walked around like none of this had anything to do with him. The only difference was I knew the truth. And that truth made everything they said sound smaller. At first, I didn't plan to do anything right away. I wanted to see how things played out. I wanted to know if, given enough time, anything would change on its own. But people don't change when they're comfortable, and they were very comfortable. About a month later, the cracks started to show. It began with small arguments between Carol and Mark, whispers at first, then louder conversations behind closed doors. Bills were being discussed more often. I'd walk into the room and they'd suddenly go quiet. Daniel started acting stressed, constantly checking his phone, stepping outside to take calls. Something was building, and I knew exactly what it was. Then came the night everything surfaced. We were all sitting at the dinner table, one of those tense, quiet meals where no one really wants to talk, but no one wants to acknowledge it either. Carol finally broke the silence. "We need to discuss something," she said, her voice tight. Mark leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, already irritated. Daniel looked between them like he was bracing for impact. "There's been an issue with the property. Some kind of transfer. We're trying to figure it out." I kept eating. Calm. Silent. Listening. Mark scoffed. "It's probably a mistake. These things don't just happen." "But they do." Daniel finally spoke. "What kind of transfer?" Carol hesitated, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked unsure. "The ownership. It's been reassigned. Legally." There it was. The moment I had been waiting for. I set my fork down slowly, making sure the sound cut through the silence. All three of them looked at me, probably expecting me to ask questions like I always did, to look confused, concerned, small. But I didn't. "I know," I said. The room went completely still. Daniel frowned. "What do you mean, you know?" I met his eyes, then Carol's, then Mark's, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing below them. I felt steady. "It means," I said, my voice calm but firm, "the house isn't yours anymore." Carol's face drained of color. "That's not possible." Mark let out a short laugh, like the idea itself was ridiculous. "And how exactly would you know that?" I held their gaze for just a second longer before saying the one thing that changed everything. "Because I'm the one who bought it." For a second, no one said anything. It was like the entire room forgot how to breathe. Then Mark let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head like I had just told a bad joke. "That's not funny," he said, his tone hardening. "You don't joke about things like that." "I'm not joking," I replied, just as calmly as before. Carol's hands were trembling now, gripping the edge of the table. "You're lying," she said, her voice thinner than I had ever heard it. "There's no way. You wouldn't even know how to—" She stopped herself, but it was too late. That same familiar dismissal, that same assumption that I wasn't capable. Daniel finally stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Emily, stop," he said, his voice low but urgent. "If this is some kind of misunderstanding, we can figure it out, but this isn't funny." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel anything. No anger, no sadness, just clarity. "It's not a misunderstanding," I said. "The ownership was transferred weeks ago. You can check the records if you want." Mark was already pulling out his phone, his confidence starting to crack as he searched. Carol stood up too, pacing now, muttering under her breath. Daniel didn't move. He just stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. A few seconds later, Mark's face changed, completely. The arrogance disappeared, replaced by something raw and unfiltered. Panic. It's true," he said quietly, still staring at his screen. "The property's been sold." Carol froze. "To who?" she demanded, even though she already knew the answer. Mark looked up slowly at me. "To her." And just like that, everything shifted. All those years of control, of judgment, of making me feel like I had to earn my place, it all collapsed in a single moment. Carol's expression turned from disbelief to something else, something desperate. "Emily," she started, her voice suddenly softer, almost pleading. "If this is about money, we can work something out. We're family." Family. The word almost made me laugh. "That's interesting," I said, standing up from the table, "because I don't remember being treated like family." Daniel finally stepped closer. "Why would you do this?" he asked, his voice strained. "Why wouldn't you tell me?" I held his gaze, steady and unshaken. "Because you never once stood up for me," I said. "Not once. You watched everything happen and acted like it was normal." He didn't have an answer. None of them did. I took a slow breath before saying the words I had been holding on to for weeks. "You have 30 days, I said. "After that, you'll need to find somewhere else to live. If you want to stay, we can draw up a lease agreement, but understand this clearly. You're not the owners anymore." Silence filled the room again, heavier this time. For once, they knew exactly how it felt to have the ground pulled out from under them. And I wasn't done yet, because walking away wasn't the hardest part. Watching them realize they never had power over me in the first place, That was the real payoff. The next 30 days were the quietest that house had ever been. No more sarcastic comments, no more orders disguised as suggestions. Carol avoided me completely, Mark barely spoke, and Daniel, he tried. He apologized more times than I could count, suddenly seeing everything he had ignored for years. But some realizations come too late. Respect isn't something you switch on when you're about to lose everything. It's something you show when it actually matters. They moved out 2 weeks before the deadline. No arguments, no drama, just silence and the sound of doors closing behind them. And for the first time since I stepped into that house, it finally felt like mine. Peaceful, quiet, mine. As for Daniel, I filed for divorce the same week because the truth is, this was never just about a house. It was about knowing my worth and refusing to live somewhere I had to beg to be respected. Sometimes karma isn't loud or messy. Sometimes it's quiet, controlled, and perfectly timed. If you've ever been treated like you were less than you are, remember this. People will only respect you after you stop accepting their disrespect. Subscribe for more stories where karma always finds its way back.